Under your chairmanship, and can I also congratulate my right honourable friend, the member for Aldridge Brown Hills, for securing today's debate and a very excellent opening speech, which I think set the scene as to why community banking is still so important. And it's a pleasure to follow the honourable lady for Barnsley Central. This indeed is a very important matter that we're discussing. There's a lot that's been discussed about rurality and access in more rural areas, but even in suburban towns like Carshalton and Wallington, just outside London, this is even there proving to be a difficult issue. And just to set a bit of context, Mr Davis, the main high street in Carshalton no longer has any banking facilities left whatsoever. There is a post office, but all high street banks have left, and I think Barclays was the last one to leave quite a few years ago. Wallington High Street lost Halifax a few years ago. It's just been announced that Barclays is closing their branch on the high street. Now, of course, people can vote with their feet and switch to another bank that has a high street presence. And Wallington does still have NatWest, Nationwide, TSB, HSBC and Santander. But, of course, the worry is that this will not be the last closure, and many, if not all of them, will eventually close. As my right honourable friend mentioned, at this rate of change, the next few years could see the end of all high street banks altogether. We've seen it in other parts of the London Borough of Sutton. Cheam Village, for example, has no high street banks left, having lost 4 over the course of the last decade. And that is the issue I really want to touch on in my short contribution today, is what is left behind when banks do decide to close. Because yes, of course, the nature of banking is changing, and I respect that there are business decisions, tough business decisions that need to be made around the future model. But there is that massive issue, and as the previous speaker, previous honourable lady from Barnsley Central mentioned, that there are many people who are excluded from digital participation in online banking for a number of reasons, but also those who rely on cash transactions, be they small businesses, charities, or individuals. And it's important that there is a left behind service for them. Now, I want to thank Barclays in particular for being very constructive in engaging with me since their decision to close, and for agreeing to do 2 things. One, to set up a Barclays van, which customers can go to. That is now going into the Dobbie's Garden Centre car park, no relation to the house elf. That will be there twice a week, every fortnight on Tuesdays and Saturdays, I believe, but also to retain a single member of their staff to have a presence in another location in Wallington High Street 5 days a week. That is very, very welcome news, and I do welcome the fact that they have realised that they need to leave something behind. That, however, is sadly not always the case when other banks decide to close, and they simply point to ATMs or indeed the post office that is in the area. But indeed, as my right honourable friend for Aldridge Brown Hills pointed out, access to cash and ATMs is also in decline, particularly free ATMs are in decline. And there is a big problem, I think, with over-reliance on the post office, because, of course, the post office is not without its problems in and of itself. The one in Wallington often has massive queues stretching out of the post office and up the road, particularly on a Saturday, actually. And its opening hours are a lot more restricted than a bank would have. So I think over-relying on the post office to provide a banking service for people once a branch decides to close is the wrong idea. There needs to be a more holistic view taken. I do absolutely support the idea of banking hubs as well. I think this is a great idea to have representatives from all major high street banks in one place where customers can go. It's a way that the banks can save money in terms of rents on buildings that potentially aren't being as utilised as well as they could be. So it's a good deal for both the banks and for customers. However, I do worry about the fact that these hubs are often only considered when everything is lost, but they can take a long time to set up from scratch. Therefore, you do have years, potentially, where absolutely nothing is in place. So I do wonder if the Minister could outline if the Treasury would consider using its convening power and using its influence to try and persuade banks to work more collaboratively and in a more holistic way, looking at community need where they are and planning in advance for these things to happen, rather than waiting for every high street bank to close and then try and set something up from scratch. I think that's probably the best way forward. So, Mr. Davies, yes, the nature of banking is changing. I think we all understand that and we appreciate that. But for so many, having that in-person service is still not only desirable, but in fact vital for many people, not least of which those who are digitally excluded. So I hope the Minister can outline in his reply what work the Treasury is doing and will continue to do to ensure that banking remains fair and accessible for everyone.